young Muslim, descendant of an immigrant from a vulnerable community. Even the individuals who are perpetrating these terrorist attempts or attacks are themselves incredibly vulnerable. And then the discomfort with which this was met. And in the early years, all sorts of excuses were made. They were just acting out because they're disenfranchised, because they're victims of discrimination, because they're poor, because they care about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. All sorts of excuses were made until, and again, I want to use France as an example because in France, they ran out of excuses. The attacks were relentless. They were coming over and over again. They were foiling plot after plot. They continued to do that. They were also becoming more gruesome, beheadings, that sort of thing. And at some point, Francois Hollande, who was a social democrat, very much on the left, who we would call him woke in America, he indulged these fantasies about disenfranchisement and so on. And that to even address the issue was racist. There was a cynical thing there because he wanted the vote, the Muslim vote. But that aside, Francois Hollande, who was a man of the left, introduced these emergency laws. And so you can see how when you neglect to address these issues and you coat them in identity politics, where a life is not just a life, where a perpetrator is not just a perpetrator, you make it more unnecessarily complicated. You go from, but we can't do this because of the values we believe in, because we don't want to restrain people, because we don't want to hold all of these groups as suspects. So from talking like that to a complete national emergency. And I think they were in that for multiple years. And it's still a sort of Damocles that hangs over their heads in France. What does that state of emergency mean? It means that the government can come into your house, that they can pick you out of your bed and take you, arrest you, interrogate you without a lawyer, put you away for as long as they want, because it's emergency laws. So it is literally doing the opposite of everything they were saying they wouldn't do. And taking us, government becomes unaccountable and opaque. Obviously, when you do these sorts of sweeps, you're going to catch people who are innocent and affect people who have nothing, who thought they had nothing to fear and who were law-abiding. All of this happens. So the analogy that you just said of imagine if these actions were committed only by people of color, but then you use skin color as an exoneration of whole groups, you can apply it the other way too.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, and here's what the paradox I don't understand. Coleman, I don't know if you see it the way I do. All of this rhetoric about protecting minorities, whether it's because of their skin color or their gender or because they're transgender, all of these things ultimately end up harming the people, the groups that were supposed to be protected. Defunding the police or calls for defunding the police and having law enforcement and the work they do compromise because of a few bad apples. That harms the Black community more than anyone else.
Really, the moral impulse behind claims to help minorities is actually more tied to the skin color of the perpetrator than to the skin color of the victim. So the algorithm that's running on people's minds now in the social justice movement is look at the skin color of the person committing this offense. Yeah. And if it's white, that's what tugs at my heartstrings, right? Yeah. And if the victim is Black, then that or minority of some kind, that helps too. But it's actually not tied to reducing the suffering of people of color in itself. It's tied only insofar as whoever's causing the problem is white or male or at the proper end of the intersectional matrix. So it's misleading.
Yes.
As a moral algorithm. It's actually not. It's not even what it says it is.
Yeah. And for the European leaders who choose to use this algorithm, this identity politics, this rhetoric, for them, the reward lies in that they can look away comfortably, that they don't have to address these incredibly difficult issues of push factors from the countries of origin, the pull factors that is doing something about the welfare state, or developing programs to help assimilate the immigrants that they've invited in. It just exonerates them from all of these responsibilities. They can go about their lives and never have to deal with immigrants, never have to see them. And they can have their own little white ghettos. In America, I was, carefully studying this movement called Black Lives Matter and their leadership. Their leadership seemed to be actually acquiring, at least, what you can measure, which is these material benefits, while at the same time, Black people are facing more crime, and Black on Black crime is increasing, and Black lives are being compromised.
Yeah, while BLM leaders get multiple houses.
They get multiple houses.
And move out of the neighborhoods. The police are no longer sufficiently policing, right?
There is that, and then they have all of these demands for reparations, and they raise these monies, but then if you can't hold them accountable, because if you ask, what have you done with the money that you raised, that in itself is racist. So they can get away with all of that, and they can see their lives financially improve, or get jobs that they probably aren't qualified for, but who dares fire them? But then you go on the ground in the projects where Black people live, and the crime rates soar. And then you see all these desperate Black mothers who are saying, please bring the police back in. Please bring back law and order. And that I think people like you and me who have to point out to these things and say, if you are sincerely interested in helping Black people, vulnerable people, immigrants, transgender people, women, then look for those who really need that help and put your money, your effort, your time there. Don't give it to these charlatans.
Yeah, part of the problem is that the charlatans are very effective in persuading the elite that they speak for the group that they're claiming to represent. And it doesn't seem to matter how much evidence comes out that testifies to the gulf between, say, a group like Black Lives Matter and what the typical Black person in America wants, right? There's, at this point, so many polls from Pew and Gallup.
Yeah.
One, for instance, from Gallup that finds, 60% of Black people say they want the same amount of police presence in their neighborhood. Roughly 20% say they want more, and then 20% say they want less. So that puts about 1/5 of Black people in accord with Black Lives Matter's position on how much, on what we should do with police presence, and puts 80% of Black Americans in opposition to Black Lives Matter on that particular subject. You would never predict that from the tenor of the rhetoric, certainly coming from Black Lives Matter and from the left in general.
And I think because maybe people listen to Black Lives Matter because they get the feeling that they're doing something about the problem, write a check, and then hope that it goes away. Or put a sign in front of your gate in a super wealthy neighborhood saying Black Lives Matter. That's just one of the most ridiculous things I've seen around here. Like a talisman. If you live in Africa, people wear some of these bracelets, and inside the bracelet is like a little package of prayers, and that's supposed to ward off the evil spirits. And people believe that if you wear those things, you don't get malaria, or in this case, maybe COVID, whatever. And so here you have these people with these placards in front of their exclusively white, exclusively wealthy neighborhoods, and having Black Lives Matter. And so they feel they've done something. They've written a check and they have the sign in front of them. And, 20% of people, Black people who want more police, they don't have to bother with those.
And perhaps they're hoping the BLM sign on their coffee shop will lead the rioters to skip their business when the riots come around again at some level.
That is, yeah. So it's that irrational, obviously not laughing matter, but just ridiculous. And I hope that we go past this and see how that it becomes clear to most, most people are just going about their daily lives. You can't blame them for that. People have children to raise, work to go to, their own personal issues to deal with. But the people who are either the elected leaders or the appointed leaders or the self-appointed leaders, and people who want to get involved, I wish that they could see these paradoxes. That empowering the charlatans just makes the problem bigger. It won't go away. That looking away just makes the problem bigger. That even in itself is a choice. Allocating resources to the wrong issues, to the wrong places. And then just how terrible from a moral perspective, we ignore the 20% who want more police. That breaks my heart, because the Black people in America who are saying they want more police, those are that 20%, they're the ones who live in very violent neighborhoods.